there, electricians, and welcome to the Ideal PowerMasters series, where we're sharing the most important tips and tricks for those of you out there in the field so that you can get your work done, not just faster, but better as well. I'm so excited because today we're talking all about bending conduit. And of course, I have master electrician and conduit wizard Greg Anliker, as well as apprentice Luis Sanchez that I know you're familiar with. Now, Greg is a 3-time professional champion of the Ideal Electricians National Championship. And of course, Luis, you placed 3rd as an apprentice in that same competition. Really great stuff. They're both here to walk us through this indispensable skill. And they're going to show us some tips as well as all their tricks to help you on the job site as well. So first up, Greg, I know you've been doing this for a while. You use conduit bending all the time. Tell me, how long have you been doing it and do you enjoy it?
Conduit bending is something that we eat, sleep, breathe, it's all we do in the Chicagoland area. I have never once ran non-metallic or BX on the job outside of temporary power. So conduit is what we know.
Well, you're the man for the job, so let's get started. Show us around.
All right, let's do it. Here I have a 1/2-inch ductile iron ideal bender. The first marking we'd have, there's 5 separate markings on this bender. We'd have the arrow, which is our stub height. On this, it would be stubs 5 inches to the arrow. Our second marking would be the rim notch. The rim notch is the center of a 45-degree bend. So if you're doing like a 22, 45, 22-degree 3-bend saddle, that would be your center bend right there on that rim notch. Next marking we have is the star. The star is when we're bending backwards. That would be the back of the 90. Takes the math away. If you're not good at math, those people use the star more often.
That's all right. That's okay. It's good to have a cheat code.
Then we have our degree markings. Our degree markings, when we're using those, we want to pull the conduit down until it is parallel with that line on the side of the bender. And then those markings are at 10, 22, 30, 45, and 60 degrees.
Okay.
And if we flip it around, one added bonus feature we have on this specific bender is the bender boot, which if you're on a slippery floor or a floor you're trying to protect and not damage, that's when this comes in handy.
Perfect. Great.
Incorporated into every ideal bender is this bending guide, which will give you like a little cheat sheet when you're in the field. The blue box is showing your shrink. The white box is showing how far apart your marks are. First and foremost, your measurements have to be accurate. Accurate measurements will lead to accurate bends. Second thing is when you flip this bender over to bend an offset, anything you're bending, a 90, whatever it may be, you want to stomp that bender into the ground, as much foot pressure as possible. As soon as you're yanking on the handle instead of putting positive foot pressure on it, you're going to get inaccurate bends. Same thing, if we flip it over and we're doing an offset or a saddle in the air, you don't want your weight back here pushing on it. You want to get as close as you can. It'll mimic the same thing when you're stopping in the ground, that heavy foot pressure. You want to be as close to it as possible with your body and to the bender head.
Excellent, that's good stuff. All right, let's bend some pipe.
Let's do it. All right, Luis, on this wall, we're going to demonstrate 6 different types of bends. First, we'll do just a stub 90 across the bottom of the floor here. Second, we'll turn that stub 90 into a back-to-back 90, and we'll run it from box to box. Third thing, we'll do the same thing. We'll bend a back-to-back, but we'll have an obstruction where we'll have to put a kick in our back-to-backs where we can run along, kick back up to miss our obstruction. Fourth, we'll do a 30-degree offset and run it right along the bottom of this 5th bend. We'll do a 3-bend saddle, saddling over this piece of PVC. And our 6th and final bend will be a 4-bend saddle over this obstruction. We'll try to get them all box to box. We'll mount them and show them how to do it.
Sounds good.
All right, let's start by figuring out what our stub height would be for our stub 90.
It is 14 3/4.
14 3/4. On a 1/2-inch bender, you have a 5-inch deduct. So if your measurement's 14 3/4, we'll minus 5 from that. We'll make a mark at 9 3/4 for our stub 90.
All right.
So go ahead and do it. So for this bend, we're going to be using the arrow. Remember, heavy foot pressure. Nice work. Okay, you want to check it? We can show them that we did it. Actually, it ended up at 14 3/4. There it is. All right. We won't even tighten it because now we're going to demonstrate how to turn the same pipe into a back-to-back. Okay. You want to take a measurement from outside a connector to outside a connector.
67 and a quarter.
67 and a quarter. We can remove this pipe. In this instance, I like to use the bender as a stop for my tape measure. So I'll lay it on the floor. We'll measure right off the bender handle. For a back-to-back, the second bend, you can see we didn't deduct 5 inches. We're going to use a star, and we call this a back bend. So we're going to put the bender and pull back towards the way we took our measurement from. So you can put the star on that. Make sure this leg behind you is straight up and down, just like your bender handle. Okay, while it's still up, I would take this measurement now. We know that's 14 3/4 tall also. See how we did? All right. Back to back. Done. Let's move on now to our kicked back to back. We need to get measurements for this bend. You want to go to that end? I'll hold this in for you.
Hold this real quick. 77 3/4.
77 3/4. And then we need to see how long our leg needs to be to run the bottom rail of the wall here. We'll go 11.
11.
Okay. So our first bend is going to be an 11-inch tall stub 90, correct?
Yes.
How are you going to go about making this bend? What feature are you going to use for this bend?
The arrow.
Correct.
So 11
11 minus 5.
minus 5.
There we are. So we have a mark at 6 to make our 11-inch stub. Measurement number 2. Do you remember what it was?
77 3/4.
Okay. 77 3/4. Where are you going to make your mark at?
77 3/4.
And what feature of the bender will we use for this?
The star.
The star, correct. Because we're going to bend back towards our first bend.
So.
Where would be a time that you would use this style of bend that you can think of? I know for me, like if I was roughing walls and I needed to kick it back behind the studs instead of running through all the studs, just like this, I would kick it back behind. Instead of drilling holes through all these studs, we can just avoid all that by kicking behind the wall if it's a dead space.
Right.
11 inches again. Okay, so now we need to add kicks, and so this pipe doesn't want to run into the side of the wall, right?
Right.
The shortest stub 90 that you can really add a kick to with a 1/2-inch bender is about 10 inches. So we're really pushing the limits on this, but I'm sure you can do it. I'd put it right on the end of the pipe to add that kick. Heavy foot pressure because it's going to pick up on you. Perfect.
No,
Same exact bend, same direction on the opposite end. Heavy foot pressure. Okay, let's see how you did. Beautiful. Want to tighten it down?
Sure.
We're going to move on to an offset. We'll do a 30-degree offset.
Cool.
Do you know what a multiplier is for a 30-degree offset?
2.
Okay, we're going to multiply it by 2, correct. So we need to get a measurement from either the center of this pipe to the center of this mini, or the top of this pipe to the top of this mini. It doesn't matter which part of the pipe you measure as long as you do it the same at both locations. So go ahead and get a measurement down from this board to those two. Tell me what both numbers are.
6.5.
Okay, 6.5 to the center. So we'll measure to the center there. About 1/2. So we're gonna just make a 6-inch offset. When you go to make marks for your offsets, do you like to use the arrow? Do you like to use the star? Or do you like to use the front of the bender shoe?
I usually do the front bender.
That makes two of us. It's the easiest place to still be able to see your markings. It's not hidden anywhere, and it allows you also to get them tighter. Like we can start our offset immediately on the end of the pipe. So you're gonna make, and we need 2 marks, but the 1 mark is going to be the end of the pipe. We set a 6-inch offset with a multiplier of 2. So your second mark is gonna be where?
At 12.
12 inches, correct. Front of the bender shoe with our first bend. What are we trying to do? Where are we gonna push on this pipe?
Bring it down.
As close as we can.
Possible, and bring it down to 30.
And then you're gonna stop at 30 degrees. Perfect. Roll it a full 180, so flip it completely over. Move to your mark at 12 inches. If you were using the arrow instead of the front of the bender shoe, that would be fine too. You would just have a mark in, and you'd be using the arrow for both. You could use a star for both bends. It doesn't matter as long as both marks reference the same spot on the bender when you go to make it. Nailed it?
Yes.
About to find out. Looks good. All right, let's tighten that one in. All right, Luis, we're moving on to one of the harder ones for a lot of guys. It's gonna be the 3-bend saddle. Okay. First thing we wanna do is figure out our obstruction height. So let's measure how tall our obstruction is.
3.5.
3.5. Okay, normally I like to go a little bit over, so we'll say 4 inches, so we have a little air gap. But our box is already spacing this connector a 1/2 inch off the wall. So being we're gonna leave a 1/2 inch of gap, and there's a 1/2 inch gap here, we're just gonna stick with that 3.5, and it should still be a 1/2 inch over obstruction when we get there.
Okay.
Second measurement we need to do is from where we're starting to the center of our obstruction. Let's figure that number out.
32 inches.
Okay, 32 inches. Here's a chunk of pipe. Let's mark 32 inches. When we bend a saddle, a 22, 45, 22 saddle, it's going to shrink 3/16 of an inch for every inch we come out. So we're coming out 3.5 inches. We'll say 4.
Okay.
So 3/16 times 4 would be 3/4 of an inch. So instead of 32 inches, let's move our mark over to 32 3/4. Make that mark bigger so you don't lose track of which one's which. So that's going to be our new center of bend, because once it shrinks, that'll be where it ends up.
Okay.
Now we said we want a 3.5 inch saddle, a multiplier of 3 for the push-through technique. So 3.5 times 3?
10.5.
10.5, correct. Each way of the center line. Perfect. So bend number 1 is going to be at 22 degrees. Bend number 2 will be at 45, and bend number 3 will be back to 22. Your center of a 22-degree bend is about at the K in this bender.
Okay.
Like I said, the rim notch is the center of a 45. So we're going to move forward a little for the center of a 22. We'll stick with the K for bend 1 and bend 3, and the center bend, you're going to use the rim notch.
Cool.
Remember, keep your weight really close to the front of the bender.
Twenty-two.
22.5. Spin it 180 degrees. Make sure that's right in line with your first bend. 45. Back to that K mark on the bender. And like I said, on this bend, I'm just going to sight down it as I come down. Don't even really look at the degrees. Just wait until you're in line with your first bend, because we want to be right back onto that same plane. Cool. Good?
Yep.
Okay, we'll hold it up and get a measurement. Measurements like this are hard to take ahead of time because the obstruction's in your way. So it's almost easier to just bend it, hold the pipe up, and cut it. Okay. All right, Luis, let's start working on our 4-bend saddle. We got our measurements. Time to start marking the conduit.
All right.
So from the box to our obstruction, we said it was 35 inches. Go ahead and make a mark at 35 inches. All right, on a 30-degree offset, we will have a 1/4 inch of shrink for every inch of height. We said we have a 4-inch obstruction, so you're gonna shrink 1 inch. So we're gonna go 1 inch further this way because that pipe's gonna shrink after we make our mark.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's gonna be our new mark. You can scribble off that first mark because now we've accounted for our shrink.
All right.
All right, now we have a 4-inch offset happening. We're gonna do 30 degree, so it's a multiplier of 2. 4 times 2, 8 inches, right? Okay, and then we had said our obstruction is 19 inches long. So from our first mark you had made, an additional 19.
19.
And then from there, another 4-inch offset.
All right.
Perfect. We'll do the same thing we did with the 3-bend. We'll do this as a push-through method.
Okay.
So instead of having to flip around, we'll start on one end and just go through. We'll just use the notch for all 4 of our marks.
Okay.
Get this, and you're going to start from here. You can do it stand. You can do it all standing.
Okay.
We're going to use that rim notch for all our bends. Remember, keep your weight real close to the bender shoe. Perfect. This is when we take our time to make sure that the next bend is exactly 180 degrees. Okay. Bend number 3 is going to be on that same exact plane. You're just pushing it straight forward. Bend number 4. Yep, 180 degree roll. What instances do we put 4-bend saddles in for most often?
There's a big I-beam.
Big I-beam, that'd for sure be one. Ductwork, something wider than a pipe. You know, if it's something rectangular is usually when we're doing a 4-bend saddle. It could even be a bank of our own conduits, right? Coming out of a panel and we gotta miss them all. That'd be an instance we do the 4-bend saddle. All right, I'll hold it up so you can get a length. Oh yeah. See how you did, Luis. And you said you're an apprentice, right? I work with the guys that can't do that. Nice work.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm gonna get a shot on that. He nailed it. It's a 1/2 inch right across the whole entire box, and it's obviously starting equal distance on both sides also. Nice work, Luis.
Thank you.
Greg, Louise, it looks great. How'd it go?
Fantastic.
Have a good time?
Yes, for sure.
Make it look easy when you got good instruction, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for joining us today. It's awesome to watch you work, and like I said, you make it look really easy. Now, for all the bends that you saw today, you can also learn these using the Ideal Bender Guide 3D instructions inside the Built app. For those of you just getting started in your career, we encourage you to use these tips and practice whenever you can get the chance. Now, you can watch this episode of PowerMasters and more at idealind.com/PowerMasters.